Recently I started playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. I had heard a lot of good things about the Yakuza series, and its most recent entry is one I've seen get a lot of praise, so I thought, why not? Not only is this the first Yakuza game I've played, but really the first JRPG I've played as well. After getting to grips with the narrative pacing and gameplay mechanics unique to the series, I have become totally engrossed in this game. I bet I'm around 30 hours into the thing, and I feel like I've only just scratched the surface of what's on offer. Not only is the main story sprawling and epic, but there are an absurd amount of side missions and minigames which have kept me glued to the couch for hours upon hours, and I regret nothing. But I think the best part of the game is its protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga. Again, I'm not familiar with the mainline Yakuza games, so long-time Yakuza fans, I'm not trying to compare Kasuga to the mainline series protagonist Kazuma Kiryu. However, the more I play Like a Dragon, the more I like Ichiban as a character. Not only do I think he's a fantastically written protagonist from a story perspective, but more specifically he's also the perfect video game protagonist. Now, as I said, I'm new to the Yakuza series, but from what I've seen, Ichiban Kasuga is the polar opposite personality-wise to the main series protagonist Kazuma Kiryu. Whereas Kiryu is stoic and hard-edged, Ichiban is juvenile, excitable, and naturally funny. Even though he's supposed to be 42 years old for most of the game, the way Ichiban interacts with a lot of people feels almost childlike. He wears all of his emotions on his sleeve, and this makes him incredibly easy to empathize with. Whenever he comes across a street thug or bully, he has no qualms about getting stuck in right away and giving them a piece of his mind. If he achieves some kind of victory, no matter how small, he jumps for joy with a grin stretching from ear to ear. It's his passion and optimism which also makes him so funny. All of the humour surrounding the character comes naturally from his personality. He doesn't have one-liners or quips like a Deadpool or Spider-Man, instead all of the gags follow a clear line of logic based on the character. It's like the difference between a stand-up comic and a comedy sketch. He isn't telling any jokes, but his line delivery and turn of phrase produces a lot of laughs from the player. Ichiban's backstory is that he's an orphan who was essentially raised in a brothel. As a teen, he was a petty thief living on the streets where he fell in with the Yakuza. Because of his upbringing, Kasuga has a completely warped view of the world. He sees the Yakuza like fabled warriors, adhering strictly to codes of honor and keeping order within the criminal underworld. To him, many of the Yakuza aren't ruthless crime bosses, but heroes of the people. And this worldview is what informs his primary character traits as well as the game's visual flair. Ichiban repeatedly mentions his love of the Dragon Quest games, and references to fantasy gaming and literature are all over the place. That's why there are literal dungeon crawls in the city sewers, why the combat is turn-based, and why Ichiban runs around town with his friends like a D&D group. This is also what influences Ichiban's moral compass. He sees himself like a chivalrous knight whose sole objective in life is to defend the downtrodden and fight against evil. And it's that innate passion within the character I mentioned earlier which makes these traits so entertaining to watch and play. Ichiban is kind and loyal to a fault, both to his closest friends and random people on the street. No matter how many times Nanba tells him he treated Ichiban's wound because he didn't want to deal with a dead body, Ichiban still says he owes Nanba a life debt. Even apparent bad guys who try to beat him to a pulp are given second chances when Ichiban learns more about their circumstances. He will literally become embroiled in brutal street fights just to make sure someone he barely knows gets to go on a date. He'll run around the city looking for a premium sushi set just to make sure a crawfish he thinks is cute doesn't get eaten. He'll become the president of a fledgling confectionery company with no business management experience whatsoever in tribute to the deceased father of someone he just met. Now, these character traits and this personality would make Ichiban a compelling protagonist in a movie, TV show, novel, or comic book, but they're also why I think he's the perfect video game protagonist. You see, there's long been a discussion about the relationship between gameplay and story, and how they don't always line up. RPGs, however, usually don't have this problem because the player is the one who invents the character. But it risks becoming an issue when the writers of the RPG want to create a more fleshed out main character. In Mass Effect, the player chooses Commander Shepard's backstory from a handful of options, but how that backstory influenced Shepard's sense of morality, worldview, and personality is entirely up to the player. In The Witcher, the player can customize Geralt's appearance, weapons, and spells, and guide him from place to place, but it's the writers of the game who determine his personality, his relationships, and his motivations. Now, to be absolutely clear, I am not trying to make out that this is in any way the wrong way to make a game protagonist, or that these are bad characters. However, Yakuza Like a Dragon is one of the rare instances in an RPG where the protagonist is a fully fleshed out character whose traits, personality, and goals line up exactly with the player's actions. Not only can we live through the character, customizing his appearance, upgrading his stats, deciding where he goes, but we can also root for him as a viewer. One of the main appeals of an open world game, after all, and the Yakuza games in particular, is the ability to roam around and do what you want as a player. You're free to explore and try different things, talk to random people, get wrapped up in side adventures, and rack up points in minigames. And this is exactly what Ichiban's whole deal is. Rather than the protagonist being a player's surrogate or guide for a character, instead Ichiban and the player experience the game almost like partners. The game still manages to tell a rich story with a fully fleshed out main character without ever sacrificing the player's own agency. That's an impressive and very rare feat. Because video games are still a young medium when it comes to telling stories, I feel like this is a fascinating area to play in. Ichiban Kasuga is a character whose traits, personality, and drives perfectly line up with what a player wants out of an RPG, which makes me wonder how a similar trick can be pulled off in other types of games. What kind of character would perfectly suit a first-person shooter, or a real-time strategy game, and so on? It's an interesting idea to contemplate. For now though, in my opinion, as far as RPG games go, Ichiban Kasuga is the perfect video game protagonist. Thanks for watching guys. If you like what we do on this channel, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and make sure to hit the bell icon to keep up to date with all new uploads. We release videos every other week, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, this has been Rowan from Side Adventure. Have a good one.